On August 7th, Larian just revealed insane player stats which summarize the last full year since Baldur's Gate 3 launched. Let's take a look back at this unforgettable year within the Forgotten Realms through the lens of player data. So starting off with endings, 1.8 million players betrayed the Emperor after all he did for you. Now, I actually really like this because it's really interesting. First of all, I quote betrayed the Emperor. I kind of disagree with the word betrayal. If you choose certain dialogue with the Emperor, kind of refusing him, he says some really interesting things to you. I know it's a hotly debated topic whether or not the Emperor is a good guy or bad guy, but you know, after all the deception in the end, I personally could not trust the Emperor, and that's the route I went on my initial playthrough. So glad to see 1.8 million players betrayed the Emperor along with me. I hold the opinion that we did not betray him. He kind of misled us. So that's interesting. 1.8 million players. We've got 329,000 players that convinced Orpheus to live as a mind flayer. Tentacles are in this year anyways. I will say tentacles are definitely in this year. Very interesting that players convinced Orpheus to live on. I don't remember what I did, but I definitely don't think I had it in me to let Orpheus kill himself. I think that was the path he goes down. Yeah, there will be spoilers in this video, of course. So that's interesting. Kind of a small number, 329,000. So I wonder who actually went ahead and took the tadpole and went into a mind flayer. 3.3 million players killed the Netherbrain. 200,000 of those had Gale blow himself up to do it. Elminster approves. That's a lot of people who killed the Netherbrain. That's awesome. That basically means that's how many people essentially beat the game. Very interesting. 200,000 had Gale blow himself up. That's a pretty low number comparatively. Not everyone has Gale in the party, and not everyone would be willing to let him sacrifice himself. I actually didn't have Gale in my party myself. And then this is probably one of the most interesting stats out of all of this. 34 players out of the millions that played chose to play as lae'zel, as their origin character, their avatar, and they chose to kill themselves at the end of the game after Vlaakith rejected their ascension. You read that right. Now, I didn't even know either of those two things could even happen. I didn't even know that you could ascend or try to ascend, and I didn't know you could choose to kill yourself if Vlaakith rejects your ascension as lae'zel. I didn't play a lae'zel origin playthrough all the way, did play that intro so I could take a look at Losir, but look at that, who actually did it? 34 players out of the millions, truly a rare group of people. I had no idea that that was even an option. I'm sure many people did not know either. Moving on to the top character classes per race, top 3. This is a very interesting little infographic here. So looks like when it comes to dwarf, players like to be a paladin, a barbarian, or a fighter. Very classic. When I think of a dwarf, it's very fitting that they would be a paladin, a barbarian, or a fighter. I think of, personally, I think of like World of Warcraft. Yeah, dwarf paladin absolutely makes very logical sense. When it comes to Dragonborn, we've got sorcerer, paladin, and barbarian. Not surprised here. Dragonborn sorcerer is the Dark Urge default, so that makes a whole lot of sense there. There's a whole lot of those there. When it comes to halflings, we got bard, rogue, and monk. Makes total sense. I feel like if you're playing a halfling, you might do something more fun, like a bard, because I feel like if you're a halfling, you're kind of more open to whimsical things, right? If you're a gnome, kind of similar situation. We've got bard, rogue, druid. So 2 of the 3, same class, because halflings and gnomes, in my mind at least, seem like similar races. And then we've got tiefling as a paladin, barbarian, or warlock. Totally makes sense. We finally see the warlock class appearing. I feel like tieflings with their horns kind of give off that warlock vibe. And then when it comes to elves, we've got rogue, ranger, and druid. Absolutely fitting. When I think of an elf, I totally think of those 3 classes. And then when it comes to half elf, we've got cleric, paladin, and sorcerer. Totally agree with all these. I could see everyone role-playing as these classes with these races. All this combination makes total sense. I think I skipped drow. When it comes to drow, we got warlock, rogue, and sorcerer. So that makes total sense. Drow kind of leaning towards, a little more, I think they're described as brutally pragmatic, so a little bit darker. Warlock rogue, sorcerer could totally see it. So very cool seeing each top class per race. Makes total sense, I feel like, when it comes to role playing, what class you might want to play. All right, moving on to epilogues. So looking at the end of the game, 1,498 players hugged God Gale goodbye. He has to go. His planet needs him. I will admit, I've actually never played a playthrough in which Gale successfully ascends to godhood. I always see a holographic image of him. I believe that's if he failed to succeed. So I'm going to have to dig into that and see, how do I let Gale succeed? I believe he tries to fetch the Crown of Karsus from the river, down by the river, but I haven't done it personally myself. That's a very low number, by the way, about 1,500 players out of millions. We've got 1.1 million players gave Halsin a hug. We bet he smells like moss and wet dog. I never thought about it. I think he would have kind of a nature scent to him. 1.1 million players giving Halsin a hug is quite a few. And we've got 2,185 God Gales chose to transform Tara into a hairless cat. Why would you do that to her? That's a very low number, and this is actually another interaction I've never experienced. Probably gonna have to do a Gale origin playthrough. I've got one going. I gotta finish that one off. God Gale turning Tara into a hairless cat. That is interesting. Did not even know you could do that. We've got 54,000 players petting Tara. Dozens of pigeons watched on in horror. 54,000 players, relatively low amount. And Tara, I believe you can actually probably pet Tara in a non-Gale origin playthrough. You can find Tara on the rooftops in Baldur's Gate in Act 3. Very cool though. Still pretty low numbers, pretty rare. All right, Scratch. Let's look at the pets section. Scratch was petted over 120 million times, the least he deserves for his perfect fetch record. I loved Scratch. I have to be honest, the very first time I encountered him, my first thought was, oh my goodness, I need this as a companion. I need this dog as my companion. So happy when he came to camp and became that permanent companion. So awesome. Absolutely love it. I can totally believe the over 120 million pets. That makes total sense. The owlbear cub was petted over 41 million times. That's why we have two hands after all. Same here. My first playthrough, I believe I got that achievement if you pet both of them, right? Interesting. The owlbear cub is a little more rare than Scratch, but makes sense. I think you have to, I don't know, maybe it's a little more resistance to get the owlbear cub. And then finally, we've got 141,660 players attempted to pet His Majesty. Lesson learned. His Majesty, I believe, is in Last Light Inn. I don't think you can pet His Majesty. I don't think he lets you, but that's a decent number of people who attempted. Still, I would say low considered to how many people play. So not too many people probably ran into His Majesty, and even fewer attempted to pet him. All right, let's move on to romance. It's gonna get a little warm in here. Over 75 million companion kisses. Shadowheart is the leader with 27 million kisses. Not surprised at all. Who doesn't love Shadowheart? Astarion is next with 15 million kisses. I think Astarion's awesome. He was my this was my basically my loadout. I had Shadowheart and Astarion and Karlach for my playthrough. Then we got Minthara coming in last with 169,937 kisses. Her number is so low that they got to be exact. That's how you know it's a low number. It's just 15 million versus, let's get all 6 digits spelled out for us. Minthara, I have to say, was kind of robbed. Like she was difficult to become a companion, right? Like most people probably play a good playthrough. Most people don't raid the Grove. Most people don't get Minthara. So I think Minthara didn't get a great chance. I think people would like to kiss Minthara more often than this statistic says, in my opinion. In the Act 1 celebration night, 32.5% of players spent the night with Shadowheart. I'm not surprised. 13.5% of players got hot with Karlach. Not surprised. And 15.6% of players slept alone. It's not you, it's them. They have standards. 15.6% of players, like more players sleeping alone than with Karlach. I am actually surprised by that. Very interesting that that's a decent chunk of people who are like, nah, I'll just sleep alone on this one. For Act 3, 48.8% of players experienced Shadowheart's final romance scene. Not surprised. surprised. That's actually interesting. More players experienced Shadowheart's final romance scene than they did spending the night with her in the Act 1 celebration night. That's very interesting. And then even more so, the same thing with Karlach. We've got 17.6% of players having a romantic dinner with Karlach. You could only have that dinner with Karlach if you're romancing her. And then we've got 12.9% of players held hands with lae'zel. That's so funny how varying levels of intimacy, although I won't spoil how that romantic dinner ends for anyone who hasn't romanced Karlach yet. And now, what you've been waiting for, 658,000 players slept with Halsin, 70% got down and dirty with his human form, and 30% chose the bear. I didn't proceed down this dialogue line, even though this is probably one of the most famous scenes in Baldur's Gate. I'll probably have to check it out at some point. 1.1 million players, that's basically almost double the amount with Halsin. 1.1 million players got down with the Emperor. 63% of players chose the Dream Guardian form. We get it, denial is a powerful motivator. And then 37% discovered the sensual pleasure of Mind Flayer tentacles. I didn't know we had a choice. I did get the Mind Blown achievement, for those of you who know what that means, but I didn't know we could choose the Dream Guardian form. Would have definitely chose that. Oops. All right. Moving on to origin characters as avatars. 93% of players chose to play as a custom avatar. I'm one of them, so not too surprised by this number. I feel like most people would choose a custom avatar, and 15% of those players picking Dark Urge. So that means they chose the Dark Urge origin background, but then customized their character, I believe. We've got the top 3 origin characters as avatars. We've got Astarion at number 1 at 1.21 million characters created, 1.2 million Gales, and we've got 860,000 Shadowheart origin characters. Kind of surprising, honestly. I feel like I haven't played an Astarion origin, but Gale origin has a lot of extra content. There's extra bonuses just for him. Not really sure about Astarion and his particular bonuses, but that was pretty popular. And then Shadowheart, I also am not aware of too many Shadowheart specific bonuses. So I actually thought Gale would be number 1. A little bit surprised by these numbers. When it comes to the top class picks, number 1, we've got Paladin. Not surprising. I think Paladin is a very popular class across many games. Then Sorcerer. I think it's a little surprising because Wizard is so low and Sorcerer is so high. I feel like those archetypes seem kind of similar in my mind. Then we've got Fighter. Not surprised. I think Fighter is always a staple, popular class. Barbarian, Rogue, Warlock, Bard, Wizard, Monk, Druid, Ranger, Cleric. And I think I can zoom in a little bit more. So we can see here Paladin was most popular and Cleric was least popular. Very interesting indeed. I feel like they have very similar themes, but man, do the Paladin lay on hands and smite sound effects just not make you want to play a Paladin? Absolutely love the sounds. When it comes to the top race picks, we've got Elf at number 1. I believe they actually talked about this in an interview before Baldur's Gate came out. Then we've got Half-Elf, and then I am so surprised at how many people chose Human, which is kind of like a vanilla, I don't want to insult the people who chose Human because there's quite a few of you, 12.5 million, but very, very interesting and surprised that Human is so high up, considering all of the fantasy races you could choose. They chose Human. Then we've got Tiefling, Drow, Dragonborn, Half-Orc, Githyanki, Dwarf, Gnome, Halfling. Pretty surprised actually that Half-Orc is higher than Dwarf. I thought there'd be more people choosing Dwarf. I feel like Dwarf is everywhere in popular media. Orcs are typically displayed as the bad guy and they're kind of unsightly. So kind of surprised by these statistics, honestly. Very interesting. Not too surprised that Elf and Half-Elf are the top 2 though. And when it comes to honor mode, we've got 141,660 players who conquered honor mode. Is it a coincidence that this exact number, if overlaid upon the number of players who tried to pet His Majesty and failed, is exactly the same? I don't know if it's a coincidence or if this is some type of correlation or perhaps even causation. Who knows? Then we've got got 1.2 million playthroughs that ended in defeat. Not surprised there. Honor mode is scary. Some fights really take you by surprise, particularly the Merkel fight. 76% of them honorably deleted their save game, and 24% continued their adventure in custom mode. That's very interesting. Some people played by the book. Hey, I was defeated. Let's end our honor run. The minority was like, let's keep going. All right, here we have, most importantly, that's the name of this slide, 1.9 million players were turned into a cheese wheel, a sentient cheese wheel. That's done at Akabi in Act 3 at the Circus of the Last Days. I certainly was turned into all manner of things. I forget if it's a cheese wheel every time, but I remember losing quite a bit until I realized about that hidden ring he had. And then it says here, while 3.5 million players paid a visit to some friendly dinosaurs. That's right, you can go to Cholt and find these Alioramas there. Very awesome hidden secret by winning the jackpot of Akabi. You can get the Ring of the Mystic Scoundrel and Nirulna in that jungle of Cholt. Highly recommend. Those weapons are so much fun. And we've got 2 million players who freed us from the colony. Now, that says from the colony, so that means they had to have saved us from the Nautiloid in the opening act, and then later in Act 2 proceeded to save us from the colony. I am very, very surprised by this number. 2 million players did that. I did not do that on my first playthrough. I had no idea we could save us from the Mind Flayer colony in Act 2. That is, I tipped my hat to those 2 million players. I should have seeked out us a little bit harder on my first playthrough. I totally missed him, but that's awesome. And then we've got 377,000 dark urges figured out a way to spare Elfira and are now directly to blame for the proliferation of loot rock. This is actually really impressive. When I played my dark urge run, probably like many other players, I had no idea what was coming. I didn't know to knock out Elfira before I long rested, so I was shocked like many others. Probably out of all the experiences in Baldur's Gate 3, one of the most jaw-dropping things. If you haven't done it, you should check it out. Very interesting. Pretty low number, 377,000. And that is the end of the statistics. However, the real stat I want to see is how many people killed Wolbrin. Hopefully it's in the millions, tens of millions if we're lucky, but I absolutely did not know about some of these after over 1,000 hours, so I'll make sure to get those into your shorts feed as soon as I can. Thanks for watching as always, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.